Hi, we're here in my Egyptian necromancy outfit because I'm going to be talking about Cleopatra, part of my Cleovember event. I'm going to be talking specifically about Cleopatra in comics. And I read well over 50 comics and got details about a lot of those, and tried to make a video about the whole lot as a sort of overview where you'd get a little glimpse of all sorts of things. And it was I began to realize about minute 26 that it was about as entertaining as chewing mummy dust, which, for the avoidance of doubt, means I thought it was a bit boring. In case there's anyone thinking, oh, mummy dust, yeah, that's on my bucket list. So, going to take a different approach that's more like a top 10, because there's some of them I think are really cool in various ways. But just to talk about the sort of overview briefly, Cleopatra has a busy afterlife in the world of comics. I showed you a couple in the last video, but she's apart from anything else, she meets comic characters in a veritable A to Z, from Asterix to Xena. And she's not just those two. Alley-Oop she meets, Batman, Aztec Ace, Doctor Strange, Iron Man, Superboy, and Man. So she's always meeting comic characters, and she's in stories where she's brought forward in time. People go back to time to meet her. She's reincarnated, or sometimes it's just something she once owned forms the basis of a story, including in quite a significant comic, I suppose, Batman issue 1. There's the Joker trying to steal Cleopatra's necklace from her lily white neck, as he puts it. So, yes, interesting stuff, but focus. So here's my top 10, and I'm going to go through chronologically. So I started in 1942 with All Flash comics. So this was a quarterly comic about the Flash. This is the superhero, the Flash, but the sort of original Golden Age version with the Mercury type helmet. And in a story written by Gardner F. Fox, we see it's a time travel backwards story. So there is a professor who's invented a method of time travel, which interestingly involves taking tablets. So there's like tablets for the different times you want to go to, which is kind of cool. And because of this, he's been kidnapped and taken back in time by gangsters. So the Flash is worried that they'll be wreaking havoc with their Tommy guns back in ancient history. So he goes back to sort things out, and there is Cleopatra. Now, Gardner F. Fox is a kind of legendary writer, lots of important comic stuff, and he's written novels in lots of sort of pulp genres. Here he's giving us not the best pun ever. So text panel, history tells us that Olympus unrolled a rug in front of Caesar and Cleopatra was inside it. But the professor, the professor is intervening in history by masquerading as an Egyptian. The professor, who was Olympus, did no such thing. Cleopatra was cutting a rug in true jitterbug fashion, as the professor had taught her, and due to the inability to translate this into Egyptian, the historian said the rug was unrolled. So, rug, cutting a rug, as in dancing, yeah, maybe not Gardner F. Fox's best work, but we do get to see Cleopatra doing a dance, not just any dance, the truck-in dance, and she's doing it with the finger motions, and she's singing the song. That all ends well. So, All Flash, good. One of the many examples, modern super characters heading back to interact with Cleopatra in some way. I also really enjoyed the Superman newspaper strips. So over here in Britain, we don't really have the Sunday funnies. Certainly not a tradition or anything anyone would know what you were talking about. So as I understand it, there were big full-page comic strips week after week in syndicated through newspapers throughout the land, and Superman was one of them. And so these Superman strips from the late 40s, this is 1948, this one of the stories features him. Superman is hurled back in time by accident as he's rescuing the Earth from a comet, and finds himself, he's back in time with Cleopatra. There's Cleopatra, and he gets involved in basically a sort of love triangle, or a sort of crush-having triangle between himself and Mark Antony and Cleopatra. Mark Antony, green as the Nile with jealousy. So it's as much a humour strip as anything, really. But stuff you get to see in this includes Superman super blushing as Cleopatra is sort of setting her cap at him. Call me Cleo. And then the terrible realizations he remembers. Hang on, I'm meant to be going out with Lois Lane. But he comes to a sort of what happens in ancient Egypt, stays in ancient Egypt realization, thinks, well, yeah, Lois Lane won't be born for 2,000 years, so does it matter? Lots of things happen, but in the end, he ends up back in the present with Lois Lane, and he's totally gone off Cleopatra and won't even go and see her in a movie. So that was fun. Same year, Marvel, or one of the sort of predecessor companies of Marvel, had a comic called Venus about a goddess type who's come down from planet Venus, and I think she's meant to be Aphrodite, and she wants to experience human life, and becomes a magazine editor for a beauty magazine. These stories are a lot of fun. And one thing about her previous life in this sort of Olympus type place is she has these handmaidens or helpers who are like beautiful women from throughout history. Although Dr. Jenny points out they also tend to be doomed women from throughout history, like Juliet, Circe, Isolde. But they're living in a sort of heaven now, I suppose, and they're helping Venus, including helping her with a magazine article idea where lovelorn women who can't figure out their beauty regimes write into the magazine, and so these famous beauties of history reply to all the letters. So that happened in the continuity of Marvel. It's odd that Cleopatra would be subordinated to in this way, particularly as Cleopatra was sort of an incarnation of the goddess Isis, who, in a sense, is Aphrodite and Venus as well. But they don't really get into that. In the end, they help to save the world, which is pretty cool. Fast forward to 1959, I came across Schoolgirl's Pictory Library Companion, some digest-sized comics, black and white interiors, beautiful painted covers, and two of those had Cleopatra stories, both also featuring Charmian, who's a sort of a confidant, helper, staff member of Cleopatra's team. One of them's like a Charmian origin story. But both the stories involve saving Cleopatra from assassination attempts that are pretty frequent. In between all the time travel and hanging out with superheroes, various evil sorcerers, rival kings, Romans are trying to see her off as well. So the plucky young girls, and we see them as these kind of jolly teenagers. Cleopatra's described as being madcap, which makes a change from things like Serpent of the Nile. He's they're great, and the artwork's great as well. So really like those. Fast forward again back to Marvel with Tales of Suspense in 1963 with an Iron Man strip. So it's Iron Man, early Iron Man, when his Iron Man suit was a bit like a big clunky robot. And he's also pretty. I mean, he nearly dies because he hasn't plugged himself in to the electricity supply in his hotel room. So luckily he has an adapter and does get himself going again. But yes, so Tony Stark, there's a sort of an evil sorcerer who's come forward in time, and it ends up with he kidnaps Tony Stark, he thinks, not realizing he's got Iron Man into the bargain, takes him back to Cleopatra's time, and basically with his suit. But I mean, the suit in those days, it was brilliant because for a start they keep going on about transistors as being the sort of main technological component. It seems like transistors could do anything, but also it's just like him producing, like, I can make a drill come out of the suit, sort of, compared to today's kind of power levels and so on. It seemed really weird. At one point, he puts casters. He magnetically attaches casters to his suit so he can lie down and hurtle along like a sort of car and ram some chariots. So ridiculous. It's like when kids would say, and then he put wheels on.
Then he was so happy.
But despite the clunkiness of the suit, Cleopatra falls for Tony Clark's invisible, apart from the eyes, charms and wishes he could stay. But he doesn't, and yes, all is resolved. But that's a nice one. Following year, Rip Hunter, Time Master. So he's a DC character. Rip Hunter and his chums, they go back and forth in time in a time sphere. So it's perfectly reasonable, of course, that they should encounter Cleopatra, which they do twice. First time, Cleopatra's trap. It's like Rip Hunter, manly man, becomes sort of involved in a plot. He's kind of he's masquerading as Caesar and stuff like that, and it all resolves okay in the end. Although there's this rather queasy idea that Cleopatra has almost, she's not just attractive in the like, oh, she looks nice way. She's got sort of mind control almost because of being so attractive, at least to the male of the species. But they end up on good terms. So in Rip Hunter 21, a movie studio tell Rip Hunter that they are planning a charity event and they want to have the greatest beauty contest of all time. And because it's for charity, even though he normally only uses his time travel equipment for like emergencies or research, goes back and kidnaps persuades Cleopatra, Helena Troy, and a bunch of others to come and participate in this event. So you get, now Jenny, you'll have to turn off your feminism filter for this one.
Ain't gonna happen, my friends.
You get a lineup of these famous beauties, and they are catty with each other, and it's all a bit awful, really. Yes, but it was 1964.
Was that before we knew women were any good?
Sort of, yeah. Although that same year, another one I really liked was a Doctor Strange story. And this is one where Cleopatra comes forward in time. And in this, she's been hurled forward in time by an evil sorcerer as one, yet another way of getting her out of the way. And with this like mysterious Steve Ditko artwork and this kind of mystical atmosphere story, she's amnesiac and she's basically wandering the streets of New York wearing a veil. And Doctor Strange encounters her and figures out what's going on. So it's a beautiful portrait of the sort of mysterious figure. So he sorts that out, gets her back in time. Later on, late in sort of the 90s, Doctor Strange does actually go back as well, but to a different point in time, so she doesn't know who he is. But Strange and Clea get to go to the Library of Alexandria. That's good. What else? Superboy 160. This is so messed up. I've got to tell you about this one. So Superboy 160 from 1969. Beautiful cover. Neil Adams' artwork is a despairing Superboy on the moon. He's exiled himself to the moon because he's done something dreadful. And the artwork inside of a different ilk, but still pretty cool. Bob Brown and Wally Wood. Frank Robbins wrote the story. So the reason he's chosen eternal exile is because he thinks he's killed someone. So basically, at Smallville High, an exchange student arrives from overseas called Cleop, and there's a sort of there's the usual jealousy from Lana Lang and stuff going on about that. So there's this Cleop is she's like she's wooing Clark Kent, and then he's rescues her from animals because she's gone to see the wild animals to make herself feel at home. And there's some kind of person out of time stuff, a fountain of soda. What a wondrous place Smallville is. So apart from all of that stuff, it ends up, here's where it gets a bit weird. Cleop sort of lures Superboy to the roof of the school, I think it is. And they're smooching. There's kissing and holding, and she's asking him to hold her more tighter, and then he breaks her spine. Crack! So he's like, oh, I knew something like this had happened. That's it. I'm exiling myself from the planet. But she's back on Earth. She's not dead after all. And she also makes Lana Lang think she's killed her as well. So what's going on? Superboy's on the moon pacing about and then thinks, well, hang on a sec, maybe she didn't die. That'd be even worse if I'd left someone who could have been saved if I'd flown them to hospital. He goes back down and figures out what's going on. So it turns out that the sort of adult that's with this Cleop is not as he seemed, and she is the reanimated body of Cleopatra. And he's got some sort of device that he can make her move around and stuff. So remember that kissing and stuff? Yep, dead person. But it ends rather interestingly with...
I'm aghast.
I know, yeah, it's like, okay, nobody will join the dots on that.
Yeah.
He decides to take Cleopatra back to a secret location to reinter her so she can live in peace. So it's kind of like an interesting, in a timeline, not live in peace, be dead in peace. Yeah.
Yeah.
But, she's been rebrought back to life. And it's...
Don't think about it. Just pretend you never read it.
Well, there's another one I'm not telling you about where Lois Lane plunders the tomb of Cleopatra and finds lipstick, and she wears this green lipstick, and it's like, why if you find lipstick in a tomb, would you just put it on?
You weren't going to tell us about that, though.
Finally, my number 10 is not that. It's another. Doctor Strange has encountered Cleopatra, so has another supernatural practitioner, Sabrina, the Teenage Witch, in 1997, in a comic tie-in with a TV show. So over in Riverdale, Sabrina brings Cleopatra forward in time to help with a school project. But what happens is Cleopatra likes the modern times with your MTV and CDs and going to the mall, so she doesn't want to go back. In fact, she sends Sabrina back in time so she can still stay living in the present. This is during the sort of Cleopatra is with Mark Antony period. And from Mark Antony's point of view, this must have all seemed like, she's meeting flying men and disappears and covers all this strange knowledge of the future, and then she disappears again. No wonder he drank. The one cool thing about it is that what makes Cleopatra eventually want to go back in time is observing herself being erased from history, and like she's not in the museums anymore. So cool bit of science fiction there. So yeah, that is my top 10 Cleopatra comic book appearances. I'll be back soon with some stuff about some more books I've read.
Kids, if you're plundering a tomb and you find lipstick, don't put it on, for pity's sake.
It wouldn't be my first choice.
No.
Keep on trucking.
No.